I think that's something that we often hear, and I've said it myself, is that the IDF is much more barbaric and ruthless than the U.S. military. And I do think that's true. But there is a lot of barbarism that was committed by Delta Force, right? So you have, like, to quote your book, killing up to 100 Afghans at a time and leaving whole villages in smoking ruins, dropping a 2,000-pound bomb on civilian water infrastructure. Luckily, the bomb didn't detonate. Then you had someone named Eddie freaking evil Gallagher, who, quote, indiscriminately shooting unarmed men, women, children, and the elderly during the Battle of Mosul for no reason but to rack up confirmed kills. And then to the fact that many people told you Delta Force's job was to kill. So how do you compare Delta Forces to the IDF?
It's a great question because there's not many militaries who can make the U.S. military's conduct in Iraq and Afghanistan look good by comparison. But I agree with you that the IDF clears that bar. We saw that most, I think, instructively in the case of Anthony Aguilar, who I know you've spoken to a lot. And it's interesting, for those who don't know, he's a special forces officer, lieutenant colonel, if I'm not mistaken, Green Beret, who went over there with the humanitarian, quote unquote, humanitarian organization, right. Fake humanitarian organization. I listened to some of his interviews and I found it very interesting because, the sort of things that he complains about were reflective of the mindset within the U.S. military. Like, it wasn't just that the IDF was indiscriminately shooting people. He was like, why are we here on a tourist visa?
Right.
And he also had a lot of technical things like, why are you using concertina wire, razor wire on a civilian fortification or civilian infrastructure? These things that most of us wouldn't necessarily think about, but which are very legalistic, technicalities that they were not following because the U.S. military, for all its atrocities and abuses and indiscriminate bombing, actually does conduct itself according to a certain legal architecture that they take very seriously. We may blow it off and say, oh, that doesn't really mean anything, but they take it seriously. They check all of their, they cross all their T's and dot all their I's as far as that goes, or they usually do. And so that's why Colonel Aguilar was so appalled by what he saw, is because they were making no pretense of following some kind of law of war. And that's very true of the IDF. I mean, words fail me when it comes to describing the conduct of their genocide, their indiscriminate slaughter, their sport killing of children and everyone that they can murder. They believe in no rules constrain them. They can do anything that they want. And they'll just murder anybody that they want to. Like they just murdered the negotiating team in Doha and bombed, I don't know, the sixth country that they've bombed in the last year or so. I don't know. I've lost count. But all that being said, it actually is the case that, the JSOC kind of goes by IDF rules of engagement when it comes right down to it. Not so much that they're engaged in widespread slaughter of people, but their rules of engagement are classified and flexible. And we saw that there's a really good example of that a few days ago when the New York Times published or revealed that mission in 2019 in North Korea, in which a totally unarmed innocent fisherman stumbled upon what was a SEAL Team 6 operation in progress. And the SEALs just killed them all rather than risk any witnesses. It's so funny because I have to digress here. This trope is used again and again in movies that portray the Navy SEALs, particularly in Lone Survivor is an example that comes immediately to mind, where some goat herds stumble across a special forces patrol. And it always ends the same way. The special forces guys realize they're caught, realize that these kids or this old man are going to go tell the whole village. But because they're American and because they have good hearts, they let them go and then deal with the consequences later and fight it out. I've seen that in lots of movies, that exact same trope in special forces movies or movies in which operators are the heroes. Look at what happens in real life. These fishermen shined a flashlight in their direction and they just smoked all of them, killed them all, knowing that they were unarmed fishermen. That's the real life versus the Hollywood treatment of these guys. And they're allowed to do that. None of those guys are in trouble. Hey, they were going to compromise your mission, so you're allowed to just kill civilians, even though they weren't going to do you any harm. You all would have gotten out of there and survived. No one was in physical danger. None of that SEAL team was in physical danger. They were backed by 2 nuclear submarines, and they could have just gotten out of there. Again, the comparison is to the IDF, and they're like the IDF in that regard. They'll kill 6 people just for inconveniencing them.
Right. Perhaps it's not as genocidal, like inherently genocidal as the IDF's mission.
Right. But, they're lawless in the same way.
Yeah.
And that's why JSOC is always in Israel. They have a permanent base there. They're buddy-buddy with the IDF. And a lot of JSOC guys think very, very highly of our Israeli allies.
Oh, right. That's interesting. Well, the news today, as you just mentioned, is that Israel bombed Hamas's team meeting in Doha to discuss Trump's new ceasefire proposal. And here is State Department spokesperson Karoline Leavitt on the bombing and Trump's foreknowledge of it. So let me just play this. Okay, here we go.
A statement to read for all of you with respect to the Israeli strike in Doha, and here it is. This morning, the Trump administration was notified by the United States military that as Israel was attacking Hamas, which very unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar. Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal. President Trump immediately directed Special Envoy Witkoff to inform the Qataris of the impending attack, which he did. The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States and feels very badly about the location of this attack. President Trump wants all of the hostages in Gaza and the bodies of the dead released, and this war to end now. President Trump also spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu after the attack. The Prime Minister told President Trump that he wants to make peace, and quickly. President Trump believes this unfortunate incident could serve as an opportunity for peace. The president also spoke to the Emir and Prime Minister of Qatar and thanked them for their support and friendship to our country. He assured them that such a thing will not happen again on their soil.
That's interesting. And it's especially interesting because let me just show you some different interpretation of what happened. So according to Qatar's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sheikh Mohammed bin Jassim Al Thani, he claimed that they first heard from the American official 10 minutes after the attack. So what do you make of this saga?
I mean, it seems like the White House is trying to distance themselves from this terrorist attack, but I don't see why. They're not going to do anything about it. What is the point of creating these gradations of knowledge? The U.S. and Israel are acting in concert. They're jointly responsible for one another's actions. And so I don't quite understand, again, the point of them objecting and saying that. I mean, I guess some kind of fig leaf of pretending like the U.S. doesn't just bomb peace negotiators. Right. But, I mean, that ship sailed, in my mind, a long time ago. I mean, bombing peace negotiators is exactly the sort of thing that the Trump administration does. In fact, he was bragging about it the last time this happened with the Iranians. They killed the Iranian negotiating team. These psychopaths, these terrorists, that's what they do. People come to the table in a good faith to negotiate an end to the war. Diplomats, professionals, and they just kill them with bombs because they're terrorists. I mean, that woman, I don't even know her name, the White House spokeswoman, she's wearing a cross.
Yeah, Leavitt, yeah.
She's wearing a cross on her neck. Does she think she's some kind of Christian?
Right.
She's an apologist for terrorists.
Really disgusting. Right.
Just this game that we pretend that, like, try to put a tiny bit of daylight between us and the most egregious and blatant of Israel's atrocities. But I don't know who tracks those things. I'd lump them into the same category, Trump and Netanyahu.
Right. Yeah.
And
And
Biden, lest we forget. Yeah, I
right.
don't want to sound partisan here.
Right. I mean, how do you compare Biden and Trump when it comes to, I guess, when it comes to Israel and Gaza, but also more generally, I guess, as it comes to foreign policy?
It's like asking me to compare the smell of cat poop versus dog poop. They differ, but I can't say that one is worse than the other. Both are really, really horrible.
I like that. That's like Nina Turner said, I think, about Trump and Biden, like 1 scoop or 2 scoops of shit. Although 2 scoops is actually a lot worse, so that may have not been the best comparison. But I think that she was trying to communicate the thing that you did. And
They're
then,
different.
yeah,
I mean, look, the Trump administration bombs fishermen off the coast of Venezuela and says they're drug cartels. They murder peace negotiators in Doha. But the Biden administration, waged a war in Ukraine that killed virtually an entire generation of people. Their propagandists just screamed at anyone who questioned that and said they were pro-Russian. The Democrats often do these atrocities on a larger scale, but with a more of a veneer of sort of professionalism and decency, whereas the Republicans tend to be more scattershot and do more insane war crimes and terrorism. Which of those two things is worse? I don't know. I really don't. I even would question the premise of the premise because they're really the same institution. The Democrats and the Republicans are the same institution. It's pro wrestling, and the Democrats play the good guys and the Republicans play the heel. But
right.
the whole WWF is there for the wars and the profits that derive from them.